All right, it's time to welcome a very special guest to the program. Got to talk a lot about USC and a man that I'm glad to call one of my very best friends, Jake, the man, the myth, the legend, Olson. Welcome to the program, my guy. How we doing?
JD, thanks so much for having me. Thanksgiving week, man. I appreciate you being gracious enough to have me on.
I'm juiced up, brother. We got a lot to jump into. But before we do that, I want to provide some context. Obviously, a ton of the USC faithful already know who you are. I mean, I've walked around campus with you, and it's like walking around with a celebrity, legitimately. But for those of that maybe haven't seen the College Game Day piece and don't know your story thoroughly, why don't you let the people know a little bit about who you are and tell them, how you got to USC?
Yeah, Cliff Notes version was basically I was born with a rare form of eye cancer called retinoblastoma. Fought that cancer in my eyes up to the age of 12 years old. Finally, at the age of 12, unfortunately, I had to lose both my eyes to that cancer, meaning I went completely blind. The mindset I kind of took out of that time period was just that I wasn't going to let blindness rob me of the things I love doing, which included playing the sport I loved, football. So as I went into high school, I wanted to play high school ball, and my very special friend JD Piquel was one of the people influential enough to challenge me to get on the field. We played high school ball together, man. That was so fun. But by kind of playing in California, we were exposed to a lot of different coaches. And one of those coaches was Coach Sarkeesian, and he basically wanted to invite me up to a practice one fall day in my senior year and asked me, "Hey, are you coming to SC?" I grew up a SC fan, always wanted to go to university, so I said yes. Planning on going to USC. He said, "Well, if you're coming here, why not snap on the football team?" And once I knew that was a possibility, I knew there was no other way I wanted to go through college. So I ended up walking on the SC football team in 2015, and then finally saw my first playing action my junior year in 2017, and became the first completely blind Division I football player.
I mean, it's incredible. Rose Bowl champion, snapped for USC on multiple occasions. Like, you couldn't script a movie about your life, and people would send it back if you did script a movie and say, no, there's no way, this is too fantastical. But I mean, all that's to say, needless to say, an inspiration to millions, in a man who has quite a bit of insight on college football as a whole and been within the USC football program. So, Jake, let's just start right there. With you growing up a USC fan, having been on the team, you have such a great pulse on the program right now. What's the vibe around USC right now, man?
Yeah, well, I think the tides have turned. We've gone through the last decade of coaches kind of being turned over left and right. Obviously, we've had some difficult seasons and not even making bowl games. So finally, we feel like we got the right coach in here. Obviously, that coach has gotten the right players in here via the transfer portal. But what I think is really cool that we're starting to see, and we saw it right after Lincoln was hired last year, and we're continuing to see that, and we'll, in the next couple months here, hopefully see it more, is that, like Carroll did, we need to continue to dominate the field, the area around LA. There's all the talent you need in the world within a 50-mile radius of the Coliseum, and that includes here in Orange County, where you and I played high school football. So to be able to kind of own that space again, I think puts USC on the map for years to come. I mean, again, that's what Carroll's success was. Lincoln will have the same success doing that.
I mean, Jake, in my estimation, USC controls their own destiny to get to the college football playoff. Like, this team was 4-8 a season ago. It is just unbelievable what he's done in the first year there. And I think the term culture gets thrown around so much in college football, but especially with the way the transfer portal has impacted our game, I think a lot of people are questioning, like, hey, how is that going to impact culture? Culture hasn't seemed to be a problem for USC to this point in time. Based on your gauge, what's the culture like right now in LA?
Well, the culture is belief. It's just absolute belief. It's belief in Caleb Williams. It's belief in Lincoln Riley. There's definitely a belief that we can win the next couple of games and make it to a playoff. Which, again, to your point, a year ago, there's some quotes even from the players saying they would have called you a straight up liar if you would have told them a year ago that was where that situation would have led to. So Lincoln, I think, can't speak highly enough of just his coaching ability, his ability to create culture. But I think for the Heisman push with Caleb, I think that has to be brought up as an X factor. You see Bryce Young at Bama, okay, they were supposed to be good. C.J. Stroud, Ohio State, was supposed to be good, and they performed maybe not as well as they should have. But Caleb Williams comes into this program at 4-8, completely turns it around, has to mesh all these new players coming in, both freshmen and transfer portal. And he's done a beautiful job with that. And I think that cannot be overlooked when you try to discern who should deserve that Heisman title at the end of the year.
The thing that I love so much about this like Heisman table that's set for Caleb Williams is all of the stages that he has available. Like he got the national game against UCLA, and then now he's got like a reasonable primetime game against Notre Dame. Then he'll have the Pac-12 title game. Like it's just lining up really perfectly. Whereas earlier in the year, a lot of the voters were like in bed by the time USC was kicking off. So I love the way it's shaping up. I'm with you. Some really, really big stages. But obviously, the big one this weekend, you go from one rivalry game to the next. For USC, they got Notre Dame coming to the Collie. What's the feel around the program right now as it pertains to Notre Dame week, Jake?
Well, I am of the belief that Notre Dame is not a special team. Now, they've played better. They've grown throughout the year, which you love to see if you're an Irish fan. But their wins against Syracuse and Clemson, I think, is a little more to say about how bad the ACC is and how good Notre Dame is. Now, Notre Dame has found a running game. Guess what? USC, for all the talk about SC's defense, and trust me, it's not perfect. It's not anywhere near perfect. They kept Zach Charbonnet under 100 yards on Saturday night. That was really a key to success. I know they still put up 45 points, UCLA did, but to keep kind of that run game in check, I think really plays well against this Notre Dame offense. If they can do that, Notre Dame does not have anywhere near the firepower they need to in order to keep up with USC. So I think USC wins easily. I think Caleb Williams, like you said, in that primetime game puts up, numbers. We win by 21, 28 points.
The Beats by Dre campaign that came out, like they're already making the push for the Heisman. But no, I think you said something really interesting about Notre Dame that is extremely relevant. Like Notre Dame's idea is, okay, they're going to run the football. They're going to take pressure off their young quarterback, Drew Pine. If USC can have that same kind of showing against the run, well, then guess what? Pressure goes back to Drew Pine. And not to knock Drew Pine, but that would be something that we haven't seen him do if he does lead this offense down the field and, he's throwing it all over the yard and what have you. He's playing 7-on-7. This game obviously has a ton of, pressure, and pressure is privilege, as I'm sure you know, having been in that program in some really high-impact, high-pressure games. What is your, maybe concern's the wrong word to use, but what is the thought process around, okay, as more eyes get onto this team, as there is more visibility with this program, is there any concern with, is this too much pressure for a team in year one of a new coach?
I don't think there's too much pressure. I just think that the defense is a problem. Look, we have dudes back there who make plays, no doubt about it. We're plus 20 in the turnover differential. So we got players to make plays. Interceptions have really come by a dozen. We've gotten lucky with fumbles this year. That's just one of those years. So the plays are there to be made, and we've made them in critical times. But look, as you get into high pressure situations against Oregon, maybe against who knows what we play, and I know we'll talk about that in the playoff, the defense is going to have to make more stands. Now, if USC can get double-digit lead, Utah, with some help of officiating, kind of disproved this theory a little bit. But if USC can get a double possession lead at any point in the game, I think it is incredibly challenging for any team then to catch up. And that's kind of what happened in that UCLA game. That UCLA had a chance to step on USC's neck. They didn't. USC fought back into it, and sure enough, they put up this 10-point lead, and it just kind of was back and forth at that point. So USC really loves to kind of build that 2-3 possession lead, and if they do, I'm telling you, it's going to be hard for any team to catch up. Can the defense allow them to do that?
It's like one of those. I like to use the analogy of like it's a track meet. If you spot USC 10 points, 14 points, like, guess what? You're not catching Usain Bolt if you spot him 10 meters. Like, it's just kind of the way that this whole thing works. Like, that's the narrative. That's the reality when you're playing USC and what they've done offensively. And they've only scored below 30 like once this year. Typically, they're living in the 40s. So I'm with you. Notre Dame, if it does become a matter of, hey, they've got 10 points, they've got however many points on you, I think that's going to be an uphill battle, the least, especially for what USC has on the table right now. And Jake, you alluded to it, Pac-12 title game, the ticket is punched. The feel is that it'll be the Oregon Ducks waiting for them there. Is there a program in your mind where, hey, this is probably the best case scenario for USC if you're trying to make the college football playoff, or the most favorable sort of matchup?
Look, I was wanting Utah to win that Oregon game, and they didn't. So I think that would have been the best case. Now Utah actually does have in my opinion, a decent chance of still getting to the Pac-12 championship game. Oddly enough, I think if USC could have played Utah, or gets to play Utah, and really does what we were going to do in that game in Utah, which was take a 21-0 lead in that first quarter. Unfortunately, like I said, there was some officiating that prohibited that from happening. But I really think that USC has the ability to just absolutely run the table on Utah. If we were able to show that on that Friday Pac-12 championship game, I think there would be no doubts then in the CFP mind that, hey, this team, the only loss is by 1 point for 48 seconds on the road and in a crazy atmosphere in Utah. They mended that loss by just stepping on their necks in the Pac-12 championship game. I really don't think you could keep SC out at that point. Now, Oregon's a good team, but I do think, unfortunately, how they performed against Georgia week 1 is still in the memory. So even if SC were to go and lay a beating on Oregon in that Pac-12 championship game, I think it still bodes well, but I do not think that Oregon necessarily has the prowess of a dominant program after that week 1 just beat down by Georgia.
No, it's fascinating for the exact reasons you just said. From a resume perspective, like you have Utah, who's really your only, I mean, not really, it is literally your only loss, and it's by 1 point on the road, raucous environment. You know, you could avenge that loss, so that would probably look good. But then you have the whole conversation around, well, Oregon, who knows how high they're going to be ranked if they do play USC in that Pac-12 title game. And in terms of like the best win you could have, does that end up being in that category for USC? I don't know, but I think it's going to be really fascinating, and I'm excited to watch it all go down for USC. Now, Jake, let's take a step back here and talk about just where the program's at right now, because your story with USC, obviously you were a fan for your entire life, but you had a chance to be around Pete Carroll when USC was humming. Compare this USC program right now in year 1 under Lincoln Riley to the energy that was really humming through that place when Pete Carroll had that place going.
It's growing. It's growing. Now, Coach Carroll's first year was a 500 year. They really started getting rolling near the second half. So a little different start, but the energy is there. Just the expectation of being great, of putting a product on the field that can compete on a national level. And these games are classic. That UCLA game was a classic game, and to pull that out was classic. That defense rising up when they needed to, just that game was classic. Oregon State, I remember, I think it was week 4 of the season. We were up there, didn't have our best game that night. Guess what? Coach Carroll struggled up in Corvallis, even with his probably most dominant teams to play in college football, or top 5 at the very least. Struggled up there. So to be able to struggle up there and pull out that win, I remember Caleb on this 4th down, a couple offensive linemen pushed him over to get the first down on the game-winning drive. I remember even tweeting at the time, that's like, if SC does something special this year, that's going to be the new Bush push. So things like that were just the classic nature of some of these wins and the excitement. I really do think we'll look back and kind of see this just classic SC season that ends in maybe a championship. Who knows? But there's definitely years like that to come. And the more we can continue to build that spirit and that character with the wins in the team, it only is going to be drawn towards top recruits coming here and wanting to be a part of that program.
No, I think you're exactly right. Like, the brand of USC is so attractive to any high school kid, but when that place is humming, you're in LA, NIL opportunities are plentiful. Like, there's a lot about USC that when that machine is really cranking, like, I mean, it's hard to recruit against the beach in LA and winning a lot of football games. Like, I'll just leave it at that. Like, that's kind of a perfect pitch if I'm a high school athlete. Jake, I'll leave it with this. Let's say USC wins out, so they're a 1-loss Pac-12 champion, regardless of what anybody else does. In your mind, does USC control their own destiny, and will they be in the college football playoff if they're a 1-loss Pac-12 champ?
I want to say yes, I really do. Unfortunately, I think there is writing on the wall of just how the nation, the media, everyone kind of treats the Pac-12. I don't think it's a slam dunk. However, I do think it is really good for college football if that's the case. I think there needs to be some cooler heads that prevail and just say, look, SC's finally here. people hate SC, people love SC. They're just their attention, and to kind of be able to put them back in that highlight in that championship or semi-championship game, I think would just be huge for college football. Now, I am absolutely frightened by Georgia. I think everyone should be frightened by Georgia. So if SC ends up 4, they got to go play in Atlanta at that bowl game, pretty much a virtual home game for Georgia.
Oof.
I think that would be a very tough game. I don't know how we would fare, but I do think just from a discussion, media, people talking about it, people watching, people hating USC, I just really think they really deserve to have, and college football as a whole deserves to have more representation than just that Southeast Conference there.
Okay, anybody who's watching this, if you're with the USC creative team, take that soundbite, clip it, put it in the next hype video, because I'm ready to roll after that. Like, I'm ready to put USC in the playoff after that. But, Jake, man, appreciate you so much. Make some time to jump on. A man of the people, an avid college football fan, an inspiration, and a USC Trojan. We appreciate you, brother. We'll do this again real soon.
Gotta say, fight on.
Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.